Hi there. Today we are going to do a review of lines and patterns. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a white piece of paper. Mine is 12 by 9 inches. So if yours is a little bit larger or a little bit smaller, that's okay too. What we're going to do is we're going to practice our vertical lines. So those are lines going from top to bottom or bottom to top. We're going to practice horizontal. These are all review lines. We learned these earlier this year. We're also going to do diagonal lines, so from corner to corner. When we do that, we're going to create these little spaces, and within these spaces, we're going to use different kinds of lines to make patterns. So first, I'm going to get my piece of paper out, and you're going to need something to draw with and something to color with, I guess. I'm going to use my black marker to draw today. If you'd rather use a pencil, you can do that. It's totally up to you. I'm going to use markers. You can use crayons, colored pencils, whatever it is that you've got working on at home. So for me, I'm going to start with my vertical line. So that's the line that goes straight up and down. And I'm going to try to find the middle of my paper. If I don't find exactly the middle of my paper, that's okay too. So I'm going to start with this vertical line going straight down the middle like so. So the next line that I'm going to do is going to be my horizontal line. So horizontal lines are kind of like a horizon line where they go from left to right, like a horizon would in a landscape. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to try to find the middle, but I'm not going to worry about finding the middle perfectly. You can see this side's a little bit smaller than this side. I'm okay with that. But I want my line to go all the way across the page. I don't want to stop in the middle. I want to stop when I get all the way to the edge. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do diagonal lines. So from corner to corner, going either direction. So I think it might be easier for me to start in the middle and start kind of from this corner and go to that one rather than try to make it go through the middle. That we might get off a little bit. So rather than making it go all the way across, I'm just going to start in the middle and go to the corner. There we go. Now I know that this really is the middle of my paper. Corner, corner, and the last one. So we should have one vertical line, one horizontal line, and then two what look like really long diagonal lines going either directions. So now I'm going to put my black marker up. Now we're just going to kind of do a review of lines in each of the boxes. And you guys can pick up, I say box, but spaces really. You guys can pick a space if you want. And what we're going to do is we're just going to review some of the lines that we learned at the beginning of the year. And we're going to end up making a pattern. So you don't want to take up the whole space. You're just going to kind of work around the edges so that our patterns can get smaller and smaller and smaller. So in the beginning, let's just keep the first one really simple. So pick a space, and we're just going to do a straight line. So I'm going to follow along the edge. I'm going to have a straight line going as close to the edge as I can. I got off on the table a little bit. That's okay. So my first line is pretty easy. I just did a straight line all the way around this space that we're going to use. So I wanted to keep it as close to the edge as I could. And now I'm going to switch colors because I can do that. That's my business. Let's see. I stole that line from somebody, but I like it. The next thing I'm going to do is you can do a straight line going the opposite direction too if you want. So I'm going to do a bunch of straight lines going this way. And what's going to happen is right now they're horizontal, but when I turn, they'll kind of be going in a different direction. So I'm just going to keep doing these short, straight lines. Notice I'm not making them really big because I want to leave room to do more and more patterns in here. So you've got to start off kind of small. That's going to be hard, but that's how this goes. You've got to start off small and not draw too big that you take up all the space. So I've got these short patterns of lines going all the way around. Now I'm going to switch colors again, get the lid on there nice and tight. And this time, our lines don't have to be straight, right? We can make lines that have a curve to them. So that's what I'm going to do. The next line is going to be a curved line. So again, I'm following along as close to that line that I just drew. I still have plenty of room inside here to keep creating lines, which in turn are creating patterns. So if I wanted to repeat my pattern, I could do that. I could just get out my pink marker again, and remember our pink marker, we did a straight line. So right inside the purple, I'm gonna do a straight pink line. So hopefully with your paper that you have right now at home, you still have enough room to do this. And if not, that's okay. You might be able to start over on the back, or you may be able just to start over in another one of these spaces, because we've got lots of spaces that we're going to fill with lots of different kinds of lines, which in turn will create lots of different kinds of patterns. So if your space didn't allow you to be able to do all of these patterns, that's okay. So I think I'm going to stop here because I repeated my pattern. So I had a pink straight line. I had short, straight green lines going the opposite direction. And then I had a curvy purple line. And I repeated that over and over and over. So within each space, that's what we're going to do. But you can switch your colors. You can switch your kinds of lines. You don't have to do the same one. So for instance, this next space over here, I might want to start with a dashed line this time. So a dashed line are where you've got the short line following with a little space in between each one of them. I'm going to make that go all the way around the edge. And notice I'm drawing it as close to that black line or as close to the edge of my paper as I can make it. Because then if I make it really close to the edge, I can always, hopefully I'll have time, I'll have space, time and space, to make more and more patterns. So if I started with a dashed line, another line you guys like are the zigzag lines. I want to make a small zigzag line, and that's one thing you guys are very good at, is making really tiny zigzag lines. So when you get to the corner, I would just stop and turn your paper like I did. That would make it a lot easier than to try to keep going. So I'm going to stop, turn my paper, and make another zigzag line all the way around. So I have enough space that I'm going to do this time. I think it would be a lot of fun to do a dotted line. So a dotted line is very similar to the dashed line, but instead of short lines, we've got little dots. Now you could make these more like a circle if you wanted to do that. Make them a little bit bigger, but just remember we have a very tiny space that we're working inside of, so if you do your circles too big, you may not be able to make a line out of them, and that's kind of what this is about, is making these lines, kind of reviewing lines. So I may go back and do a dashed line again. And I'm just going to repeat this all the way around. So you guys, if you remember in my classroom, we did this at the very beginning of the year. This was one of our very first projects ever. You probably did in kindergarten even. And I have all of those line posters, turn the page, line posters up at the front of my classroom that kind of help us remember all the different kinds of lines. And even though you may not be in my classroom right now, hopefully you can kind of look around and get ideas of different kinds of lines from different patterns you have in your house. So right now, as I make this video, it's really close to Christmas, so it could be that some of your wrapping paper that's in the other room has a really cool line or pattern. It could be some of your decor. maybe around your house, like pillows or blankets, or even clothing or scarves or something like that that you may have nearby, has some kind of really cool pattern that you could follow along. It's up to you guys to find that. So, hopefully you guys understand how to do this. I am going to pause my video and I'm going to get a little bit more done, and then I'm going to talk about what I did. So stay tuned. So here is my finished piece. Once again, you guys, you can switch colors as often as you like, but you're just going to focus on one little section at a time, and you're going to try to review your lines that we already know, different kinds of lines like straight lines, dashed lines, zigzag lines, dotted lines, curly lines. Here I just made up my own line. We got to do that as well in some of our projects. Here I made a line out of just circles, one circle after another, so kind of like a dotted line but with circles. Here I made an A-B pattern, so where it's a dash dot, dash dot, dash dot all the way around, and I just repeated them. I have, sometimes it's a straight line, sometimes I did diagonal lines, and I just repeat, repeat, repeat. So what makes these successful is when you draw nice and small. If you have this, and let's say these are your sections, I should use this marker the first time. This was a really good marker. Let's say these are your sections. Your pattern has to repeat. So you can't do something like this. Sometimes we just kind of draw shapes that we recognize, and this isn't right. There's nothing that really repeats over and over and over. You have to have something that repeats. You kind of stop with maybe what could have been a pattern, and then you started adding something else in. So this does not work. I also have kids who do this, and then they don't have any room left, and they can't repeat anything. So if you did do something like this, and you made a really, really big pattern, I'm wondering if you could make a pattern around it. So if you did accidentally make one of the, maybe your very first section too big, what can you do to work with what you've got? I know I mentioned earlier starting over on the back, but what if you've already started over a couple times and you just can't seem to make it any smaller? Sometimes we want to work really big, and then sometimes some of us want to work really small. What you can do is just work with what you have. So you do have a really big zigzag line, but then right next to it you've got a really tiny dotted line. And then what if you did a really skinny zigzag line next to that? So I would pretend like I was out here. Even though I don't want to get out of the lines, I'm pretending like the pattern would come out here, okay? So even if you worked really, really big like this with your first pattern, that's okay. You can keep going with it and see if you can just make it look like it's zoomed in on that pattern and you just don't see the whole thing, all right? So I'm going to leave it right here. You guys can pause and work along. Have fun.